I'm the CEO of a company called Ryzgo. We are based in Silicon Valley, a venture-funded company. We are developing a new protocol for a priori trust and security in the blockchain ecosystem. And the key word here is a priori. Because blockchain, when people say blockchain is trustless, they don't mean it actually lacks trust. What it means is that when you make a transaction in blockchain, when you record something in the blockchain, you can actually trust that it's been recorded correctly. So you can trust it after the fact. But blockchain does not answer the question of why you should trust the other party before you make the transaction. So for example, when I send you $10, it records it, nobody can dispute it. But it doesn't answer the question why I should trust you in the first place to send you the $10.
Right. Who starts? Do I send you the burger or do you send me the money?
Something like that, exactly. So especially in a peer-to-peer environment, this a priori trust is important, especially in a sight unseen type of situation, which is really what we want blockchain to unshackle. We want people around the world to be able to interact with each other on a number of use cases, financial, social, economic, and other use cases. So I'm going to skip this slide because this is actually very basic for most of you guys, and talk about the problem. So I introduced the notion of a priori trust and why it's important. The reality is all business transactions and all social interactions, by the way, to generalize it further, require some level or some degree of trust. You ask three basic questions before you interact with somebody sight unseen. Who are you? Who am I dealing with? Are you really who you claim to be? Because just because you assert an identity doesn't mean you are the legitimate owner of that identity. And the cybersecurity, theft, identity theft, and all of these things are rampant, and they will become even more rampant in the blockchain ecosystem as it matures. The third question is okay, I've established that you are who you claim you are. What do I know about you? How can I trust that you will fulfill your end of the bargain? So if I send you $10 to buy whatever it is, how do I know that you will actually send me the goods in return? Or if I loan you $100, how can I trust you to pay me back $10 a month or whatever it is our agreement was? And so, but this question is not new. I mean, human beings have contemplated this from a long time ago. And the notion of credit scores was introduced about 100 years ago for a very specific purpose in the financial sector. It works great for the purposes that the credit score system was actually built for or created for, but it actually ends up being applied to a lot of other situations where it was not created for, and it's actually very limiting. In addition, credit scores also vary from country to country. In the US, if you've never taken a loan, your credit score is low. But in Europe, for example, if you've never taken a loan, your credit score is high. In certain other countries, there is no credit score. What do you do with people of that sort? Okay, there are huge credit holes. I mean, the world is like Swiss cheese with lots of holes of people with who are sort of unbanked, outside of the purview of the credit system and all of that. With blockchain, since we are still in the early days, we have an opportunity to do it right and not repeat the same mistakes as the internet world did. So this is where Ryzgo comes in. So as I said, we have an opportunity to fix things right. And we have three pillars of our solution. First is identity, the establishment of your digital identity that is immutable, that is global, that cannot be argued against. Then the authenticity. This is the ongoing verification that you are who you claim to be, because there's a lot of identity theft, fraud happening, online fraud that is happening. It's easy for me to steal somebody else's identity. So it's not a one-time verification of your offline documents, but it's an ongoing, continuous verification that your identity is actually in your hands and it hasn't fallen into somebody else's hands. So I come from the world of cybersecurity, and we'll talk about the team in a few minutes. And to Ryzgo, we've actually brought in a lot of patents that we developed for fraud detection in an anonymous web environment. Okay, and we have behavior analytics techniques for which we have patents that help us detect fraud and build fraud databases that help you identify identities that have been compromised in near real time. The third pillar of our solution is bona fides, which is really your past history, your past activities in the different use cases that you participate in the ecosystem. All three combined get put into what we call the Ryzgo Trust Protocol. The Ryzgo Trust Passport. This is a passport that you as a user own. You control who gets access to it, when, for how long, why, and for how long. So this trust passport makes it very portable, it's encrypted, and it's user control, as I mentioned. So it allows you, it opens doors for you, opportunities for you that might not be available to you if you did not have something like this. So what use cases do we enable? As I said, we are a horizontal protocol that sits right above the DLT layer. We don't actually solve the use cases, but we enable use cases to use the trust protocol to enable their users to trust each other. The number of use cases that can be enabled with our trust protocol is actually limited only by our imagination. And these are some examples of that. As a business, we're going to start focusing on business to business and business to consumer use cases, and then expand into peer-to-peer use cases as well as community building use cases. I mean, it can even be used for things like dating applications and community building or closed loop communities of trust communities and stuff like that, that for various activities, whether it's financial or social. What are our business drivers? There are multiple factors that go into driving the growth of what we believe is the need for such a trust score. And that has to do with the growth of applications. These are still early days of the blockchain ecosystem. As more and more applications get built, each application doesn't have to reinvent the wheel. They don't have to create their own trust models. They can rely on a trust protocol like ours to give users the information they're looking for. The growth in users, as the blockchain ecosystem gains mass adoption, more and more users will ask this same question. Why should I deal with that other person? What can I, how can I ensure that this transaction is going to go well? And then growth in value. I mean, the reality is more and more use cases are going to be solved on the blockchain ecosystem, and that's going to drive a lot of business. Right? Ours is an ecosystem play. As I said, we live right above the DLT layer. We're going to start by supporting Ethereum, and we'll move on to Hedera, Hashgraph, and other DLTs in the future. Our view of the world is that the trust stack is multi-layered. Just as the internet stratified as it became more mature over the years, we believe that the blockchain ecosystem is going to stratify as well. The trust protocol includes the DLT layer at the very bottom, the Ryzgo trust protocol above it, and advanced analytics even above it that might be needed for more advanced use cases, that particularly for financial institutions and businesses to make. And sitting above all of that is the ecosystem of all the applications and dApps, and above that is the ecosystem of users and businesses that actually use those applications. So to achieve this, we have come up with a two-tier architecture. You can think of it as an sidechain architecture, where we are creating our own network, a Ryzgo network, that is going to be sitting on top of Ethereum blockchain and other Hedera Hashgraph and potentially other DLTs in the future. And the reason for doing it is that if you did everything that we did on Ethereum, for example, it will be not only very, very expensive monetarily, but also extremely slow. You cannot rely on every microtransaction, every atomic transaction to be stored in Ethereum. We're going to do all of that there. Our notion of trust, essentially, it's a trust transaction. It captures a series of activities between you and me. So, for example, if I want to loan you $10 or $100, I create a trust transaction with you, and there's a lot of activities in the process of the trust transaction. All of that is stored in the Ryzgo network, but the final results and the public information are actually stored in the underlying DLT. And the reason for us to support multiple DLTs is that as we see ecosystems developing on all these DLTs, we want to be able to support every one of them. All right, I'm going to skip over this as well. So now here we come to a very important slide. One of the biggest strengths and differentiators for our company is the team. We are a team of people who have many years of experience creating, building, growing, and selling companies in Silicon Valley. Collectively, we have over $5 billion we have been involved in $5 billion worth of transactions in terms of fundraising, M&A, and IPO activity. Peter Watkins, who's the chairman, he used to be the COO of McAfee Associates. He was the CEO of Resonate, CEO of Elemental Security, Webroot, another public company. He was also the CEO of Layer 8 Security company that he co-founded with me a few years ago. We sold that last year, and we started Ryzgo. My background is technology. I've been for over a decade VP of Engineering / CTO at a number of public and private companies. At Evolve Software in the late 90s, we built the largest enterprise software in the Java environment, and I've got lots of bruises from those days to show for that. I mean, it was, talk about the scalability issues that we're dealing with blockchain. We dealt with them in the early days of Java. And we went public, Evolve went public in 2000 or 2001, I forget the exact date. Snehal Karia, who's joined us as CTO, he's also an entrepreneur, serial entrepreneur, built many companies and sold many companies. Karuna Ramchandran, VP of Data Science, she's been a data scientist since before the term data science even became known. She's a PhD in statistics. She's been at Intuit, small business unit for over 10 years, doing analytics for their small business unit from a marketing perspective. And Vishal and others are, a lot of experience with identity management. We also got a good list of advisors. Mark Green, who was the CEO of FICO, Fair Isaac, the credit scoring company, as you might know. He got very excited by the idea that we were working on. He joined us on our advisory board. He was also a general manager at IBM and was at the Federal Reserve. Rich Hornstein, lots of M&A and IPO activity. Samir Kumar is a derivatives trader in Singapore at Deutsche Bank. Milestones. We got a lot of technology. As I said, we created that as part of Layer 8 Security. We own the IP, even though we sold the company and assets to another player last year. So a lot of the foundational elements were built during that time, and we are applying many of them to Ryzgo, and starting from, we founded Ryzgo in Q4 of last year. We're going to be releasing an alpha version late Q3, early Q4, and we are just about starting the fundraising. We actually started going out into the public only last Saturday, so we emerged out of stealth only last Saturday. And I have actually been invited to talk to a few VCs in the Valley starting tomorrow and next week for a seed round. So we are still early stages as compared to some of the companies you've seen, but we will be offering security tokens. We are not going to be dealing with the SEC and we are not going to try to fool the SEC. We are going to do everything the regulated way. It's going to be security tokens. Token holders will have some stake in the company, either in the form of dividends and or equity. All right, and you see our roadmap for the next. We got a roadmap for 2.5 years, but we show only for a couple of years on this slide. As far as funding and allocations are concerned, we're planning on raising about between 25 and 35 million, to be honest. A significant portion of it, half of it goes to product development, and the rest or significant portion of the other half goes into business development and marketing. It's an ecosystem play, so our success depends on our ability to build partnerships. All right, and this is the allocation of funding. As you see, I've actually left a lot of money in reserve because we do think it's a huge play. A lot of money will need to be raised, so we're going to raise it in multiple tranches and multiple stages. And so we're going to go and allocate some money, beyond to release and sell to future investors at some point of time in the future. So that's my presentation. So I'm happy to take any questions that you guys might have.
Can you walk me through a use case of how someone would go about getting verified?
Right. So the identity piece is a critical piece. So in the beginning, what we're going to do is we're going to partner with a number of companies that actually provide not only your digital identity but also do the verification. So they actually do the offline verification of whether it's your passport, or your local driver's license, government issued identity or whatever. We also are going to be we are also developing algorithms for automated recognition of verification of some of these identities using imaging techniques to look at certain markers of authenticity for various government issued documentation. We are also going to be, as part of, even though we are going to be wrapping some of, essentially we have your bring your own identity kind of an attitude. So if you have your civic or your sovereign identity, you bring it, we wrap our identity around it, and we add additional layers of information that we need to detect a fraud associated with that identity, so that we know, in a near real-time basis if we can trust that identity or not. And we also have the ability to categorize identities based on the perceived risk associated with them. So, for example, if you create an identity with only your Facebook credentials, you are at a pretty high risk. But the more information you give, the more verifications you go through, your risk starts dropping. And so part of the identity is to classify you in various categories of risk and use that to essentially help assess your final trust score. So that's my presentation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.